Hello, dear listeners. Today we are talking about the Battle of the Labyrinth, the fourth book in
Mm-hmm.
the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. This one is about essentially a battle in a labyrinth.
Crazy how
And
that works.
yeah, wild how that worked. Essentially, Percy, Annabeth, Grover, and Tyson go on a little expedition into the labyrinth to try and stop Luke and Kronos's forces from attacking the camp. What did you think of this one?
I really liked it. I went into this knowing that the last two books are my favorite of the series.
Hmm.
So I like really sped through this one because so to build on what Kayla was talking about. So the labyrinth is a giant maze, right? That basically covers basically the world, but it's underground. It's incredibly confusing and difficult. It's super old. We get a lot of like insight, I guess, into all of the different sections and all of the dangers that could be there. We see skeletons in places where people got lost and kind of just died in there. It is very like Paris catacombs esque, but
Yes.
bigger, and it's obviously magic based. So Percy begins the story where he's at school, right? And he gets
A new
really
school.
he's at school. Yeah, he's at a new school. He is at his mom's
Boyfriend's
boyfriend's
school.
school. So he's a teacher there, and so he gets Percy in, and Percy is like incredibly worried that he's gonna mess it up and it'll look bad on Paul, which
Spoiler alert.
is yeah,
Kind of does.
it does end up looking terrible on Paul. But we run into Rachel, who is a character that I hold dear to my heart.
Love
Uh,
me some Rachel.
yeah, I love Rachel. I think the fandom is incredibly cruel to Rachel. Um, for reasons that are really dumb. But so we find out that Annabeth, who first off was going to go on a date with Percy, and then
Not a date, just the movies.
yeah, just the movies, just the two of them hanging out by themselves, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and then Percy's school ends up, not going well. And so Annabeth gets upset because we see that Percy and Rachel are they have survived something dangerous together. And Annabeth kind of draws the wrong conclusions. And so when they get back to camp, we find out that Clarice had been in the maze
Hmm.
and a lot of things start happening very quickly. I think we find out that they're trying to figure out why Luke is in the maze. They're like, I don't understand what he thinks is happening. If the nearest entrance is in Manhattan, that doesn't really help him get here. Lo and behold, we find out that there is a entrance directly in the middle of camp,
Yes.
which is pretty detrimental to the idea of, keeping the defenses in line and stuff like that. But a lot of things are kind of happening in this book. We have the labyrinth and the ever-present threat that kind of holds. We have Bianca D'Angelo using Iris messages to kind of get Percy to help Nico because Nico's obviously dealt with her loss in not the greatest way. And as a child of Hades, he's like, I can bring her back. This will be great. And so Percy kind of holds responsibility, even though it wasn't his fault that Bianca dies.
Hmm.
He holds that responsibility and he decides, I want to help Nico. So that kind of becomes a subplot within this book. They also get a new sword master named Quintus. And I forgot.
I forgot
Yeah, I forgot who
the plot
Quintus
twist
was. Yeah,
with
I was
Quintus.
like,
Yes.
something's going on with this guy, but I forgot. Things going on between Percy and Annabeth are like quintessential teenage awkwardness
Correct.
because it's just a lot of like we're not communicating properly. I think I normally would get super frustrated at it, but with this I was just kind of like, yeah, I mean, they get through it, so I'm not holding any grudges. It
They're
doesn't
like
do like lasting impact or anything.
they're like what, 14,
Yeah,
15?
he had just turned 15 at the end of this book. And so it's like very quintessential, like, we have these feelings, we need to talk about these feelings, but we're going to talk about everything other than these feelings.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite parts of the book really is, well, I have two. They kind of lead into each other, but one is when Percy explodes the forge.
Yeah.
I thought that was really
Yeah.
cool because it kind of gives us a glimpse, even from his point of view, how powerful he really is. Because Percy is
Mm-hmm.
like consistently downplaying everything that he does. He's like, oh, I just kind of fumble around and I do the thing. And, even describing like his sword skills. He's like, yeah, sword fighting is like the one thing that makes sense to me. But other people like legitimately describe him as like one of the best of their
Yes.
generation. But
Like
he's like,
next to
oh,
Luke.
yeah, he's like, oh, I just kind of understand what's going on. But even through Percy's point of view, we get the idea of how big this explosion was and how much it took out of him. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, oh, I've never done something like that before. And then everyone else is like, yo, your father is literally the earth shaker. Like, you are incredibly
Yeah.
powerful. You need to be careful. And that was pretty cool. And then we get into Calypso's Island,
Calypso.
which
Ah.
I love her so much. And I really feel for her. And I like that we know that Percy and Annabeth are
Endgame.
endgame. We know that they're it for each other. Like, we knew all of this even, I think, then when I was reading
Yeah.
this for the first time. I was like, yeah, there's no way that he stays here because then the series would be over. But I really feel for both of them because with the amount of like pain and suffering and trauma that this boy is dealt in the next, like, just the next book,
Mm-hmm.
he could have avoided a lot of that just by staying on the island. And I feel for Calypso a lot because knowing who he would have been to her and knowing how much it was going to hurt, she still helped him and
Helped
she
him.
still like found herself feeling the ways that she did. And I think that that's really sad in a lot of ways. Hephaestus is cool. I like
Yes.
him a lot.
We support.
We support. I think Luke is getting a lot more complicated. He's not just like, oh, I want to get rid of all the gods. Now he's like, I want to get rid of all the gods, but also my body is not my body anymore. And I kind of don't have a choice in that. And
It's so interesting because I am it's it's very much like you have the same opinion as Annabeth, where like you think, you know, is Luke really doing that? Well, not, is he doing this because he wants to, but so, more like with Percy being like, no, he's the bad guy, like black and white, plain and simple. Like
mhm.
there's nothing complicated about that. Like he's bad. And that's where my brain is. Like he's not complicated. He's just bad. Like he's just the villain. He's just the bad guy.
Yeah, I still stand on that point. I still think Luke sucks because even before his body is in his body, he is making the choices that directly lead here. Not to mention just like the creepy connection he keeps trying to like create with Annabeth
So creepy.
is really not great. And so
I
I
hate it so much.
understand why Percy feels the way that he does. Yeah, I think the demigods are in a tough situation because they know what's coming. Kronos is upset and grumpy. We get Ethan Nakamura, which is a really cool character. I hate that we don't get more of him
Yeah.
until like bad things happen. But he's a really cool character. I liked that Nico and Bianca get that
Closure
closure
that
that
they
they
needed.
needed. Yeah, because I don't think Nico would have ever let it go.
No, no, he would not have. I
And
don't think he would have at all.
knowing that Bianca was like doing all this work and he like people forget how young he is,
Mm-hmm.
because he's so powerful and stuff like that. I
It's
think it's
like
easy to
12,
forget.
right?
Yeah, like he is young. And I think all of his feelings are incredibly valid. He is, he lost his sister kind of twice. Like he lost her when she chose the hunters and he was
Yep.
kind of having to grapple with that. And then he lost her
Mm-hmm.
for realsies
Mm-hmm.
and then lost her again when she decided to tell him, like, I am not coming back, leave me alone, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I think that's incredibly hard for him. I like that he kind of gets back into trouble because he believes that Percy is in trouble and he goes back into the maze.
Yes.
And so it shows that they're going to have that friendship, have that connection kind of thing.
I think it's also interesting to note that you kind of also get a glimpse of how powerful Nico can
Mm-hmm.
and probably will be,
Mm-hmm.
um, based on his interactions with Minos and
Frick that
like
guy.
the way that he's able to call forth like an army of the dead essentially to fight for him.
Yeah,
Um,
I think what this series does really well, or what I guess what Rick does really well, because he does this in any of his Greek mythology books, he really shows the hierarchy of power when it comes to the
mhm,
demigods. Like, I think you can really see the difference between a child of the big three and any of the other gods, because
mhm,
all demigods are powerful in their own right. Obviously, some are more powerful than others in their skill set, but these like children of the big three are just like completely different beasts.
mhm,
And so it makes a
mhm.
lot of sense as to why they all were like, we shouldn't have any more kids.
Right,
Um, because like a character that we meet later on, Jason, like he does really crazy things. And so it just kind of becomes something that is known for those the children of the three of like they're on a whole
mhm,
different level. You know, you do not want to face them if you can help it because
right,
they're just insanely powerful.
right,
Nico, I think I don't know. I love Nico so much. Percy, I think, is doing a really smart thing by making sure that that prophecy is his.
mhm,
Because as much as I do love Nico, specifically this part makes me wonder what side he would end up falling on if the prophecy became his.
right,
Because he's already holding so much resentment. He knows that Hades and himself are not really welcomed by the rest of them, which is always messed up. Yeah, I think they're incredibly lucky
yeah,
that Percy is doing everything that he can to make sure that the prophecy falls for him. And that is a decision that shouldn't be taken lightly because it really causes him a lot of like pain and suffering that he like welcomes tenfold because he wants to make sure it does not happen to Nico. And not because he doubts Nico, it's because like, oh, Nico has been through too much.
right,
And yeah, I think Percy's like self-sacrificing is really annoying sometimes as the audience because I'm like, man, you've been through so much. Why do you keep just signing up to be put through more?
right.
Take a break. Take a breather. Did you have any other thoughts?
No, I mean it's definitely one of, oh, I guess funny little side note. I read this while I was on a trip, and so I was with my parents, and my mother saw the book, and for some reason, my mother did not realize that the Percy Jackson movies actually started as books.
Mm-hmm.
So she started to read it. She started to read the fourth one, and I was like, that's number four, right? And she did not care. She was now this woman is in her 60s, and she is her reactions were so cute. I wish I could have gotten like an actual video so y'all could see it. And so anyway, the rest of my books, except for five, because I told her I still have to reread that one, are now in her possession. And she will be reading, I guess, right along with us
Yeah,
the rest of the series.
that is, yeah. No, that's super cute. I tried getting my younger sisters to read it and they just weren't into it, which is
Yeah,
the heartbreak of the century for me.
I know.
Um,
Tried to get my kiddo into it. She wasn't really having it, but my mother's into it.
that's so cute. We appreciate your thoughts. If you've been enjoying these kind of throwback series, because obviously these books are pretty old and they're rereads for us, then do let us know in the comments, like, comment, surprise, do all the things. We
Press
also
all the
make these
buttons.
videos on Spotify if you are a Spotify person. We
Yeah, thanks.
are joining a content creator on Instagram with a read along of the Bone season by Samantha Shannon. You know that in Samantha Shannon we trust. And so we are joining her on a the Bone Season read along, but by the time that you see this, we will probably be on the second book.
Hmm.
And that's basically it. I hope you guys have a good day.